Welcome to Publishing in Defense, Security, and Politics, a special series of On Defense and Security. In this series, we speak with editors to understand opportunities for publishing research on defense and security, international relations, and related topics. On Defense and Security is a podcast produced at the Center for International and Defense Policy. On today's episode of On Defense and Security, we're delighted to be joined by two journal editors representing the journal Defense Studies and the Scandinavian Journal of Military Studies. Defense Studies is a scholarly journal aimed at the study of contemporary defense and emergent warfare, both from a theoretical and empirical perspective. The scope of the journal is set to examine how armed forces seek to engage with conceptual, strategic, and operational challenges. Representing the journal is Editor-in-Chief Simon J. Smith from the Royal Danish Defence College. The Scandinavian Journal of Military Studies is an online open-access journal publishing both high-quality research and valuable practice-oriented studies relevant to the military profession. The representative of the journal today is Chief Editor Christoph Harig, also from the Royal Danish Defence College. Thank you both for joining us on this episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So that we have a sense of how these journals are situated in the field, can you describe the scope of your journal or the unique area of focus, whether that is theoretical, empirical, or methodological?
Yes, I can do that. I mean, certainly Defense Studies is a journal that obviously focuses on defense and defense as a studies area. So I suppose it's niche compared to broader IR security studies journals, although sometimes there is a bit of overlap. But as a defense studies journal, we're quite broad, in terms of what we would look at or entertain and the sort of topics of articles that we look at. And thank you for sort of reading from the webpage there about the aims and scope. And I think for us, what's key, and I'm sure Christoph will talk to this as well, is that it's not just study of contemporary defense and emergent warfare, but the theoretical and empirical perspective as well. So it's not a narrative. We tend to not entertain articles that are more descriptive in nature. Even, they might be heavily case study based and a lot of description in them, but there should be some kind of theoretical or empirical underpinning to that as well.
So for SJMS, the Scandinavian Journal of Military Studies, I can also just share that we have a very broad understanding of military studies. So we entertain broad examinations of military institutions, processes within the institution, operations, strategies, etc. We also look at broader aspects of national defense, for instance, or managing deterrence, for instance. But what we always want to see is that there is a loop back to what that means for processes within the military institution. So we're pretty much focused on what is happening, can be very broad, but how does it affect the military institution? It's also important to clarify that we do carry a Scandinavian journal in name, but we actually publish things that go beyond that. So roughly 60% of articles we publish deal with Scandinavia per se, but we also want to see things that are empirical investigations or theoretical investigations that are relevant for Scandinavian militaries, but that doesn't have to be based on case studies on Scandinavian militaries. So we're much broader in scope that the name would suggest. What sets us what makes us distinguishable here is we do only publish online, fully open access, and we also pay for the APCs. So authors do not have to pay anything to be published open access, which makes it particularly relevant for authors who want to speak to an audience of military practitioners who usually do not have access to paywalled journals.
That was a good point there. I can't say the same as Christoph there about open access, although we do have a broad policy, and in general, publishing is changing towards that, but it's different with different journals. But you have the aims of the content that you're receiving, but there's also who you're delivering it to. And so I think Christoph made a good point there about trying to, although certainly defense studies when I took on the role as editor over the years, I was trying to make it articles that were more cited by academics, but at the same time trying to expand that to who's going to read that and who has access to these things as well, as because they are behind paywalls quite often. And I think we can maybe get into this later in our discussion. There are good publishing strategies for emerging scholars or early career scholars who you may want to think about when they're publishing an article to how to bring those things together. So just wanted to say that.
This actually segues quite nicely into my next question, which was to ask you about the review processes at your journal. I see that there are a couple of different formats for the Scandinavian Journal of Military Studies and an additional screen for special issues at Defense Studies. So I was wondering if you could share a few insights into how authors can approach the review process of journals.
Yeah, so I'll start for SJMS. So we actually run two distinct peer review tracks. So we, as I just mentioned, we want to also speak to practitioners. So we do have a research track, which follows a pretty standard academic peer review process, double-blind. But we want the academic contributions to actually make clear to what area in the field they speak to. And we want to be clear what the article says for the broader meaning, in terms of broader meaning for the field of military studies. So it's the for whom and the for what we really want to see in the peer review process of the research track, apart from obviously a empirical, theoretical, conceptual contribution to the field and to the academic debate. So that's what we're looking for here. In the practice track, though, we also run a double-blind process, but this is particularly relevant for people whose contribution is more guided towards the military profession per se. So it's practical problems, operational problems that can be discussed here. We want those articles not necessarily to fill a gap in the literature, but that they should originate from an operational problem militaries need to deal with. There is often some overlap in if it's a practice track or research track, and authors are welcome to contact us before if they see their article more fit towards the practice track or the research track. We do have a military practitioner on board as a peer reviewer for the practice track all the time to make sure that we actually make sure that this is relevant for the institution. What we do in both is actually that we have a first screening, which goes rather quick. So we either desk reject within 3 weeks or recommend a straight to review, or we also have a so-called desk review, where we screen articles that we consider as potentially good for the journal, but we want to increase the chances to actually make it through the peer review process and to be a better fit for the journal. So sometimes we give authors a feedback from us, from the editorial team, to improve their article with very concrete suggestions and send it to peer review afterwards. So that typically increases the chances of articles actually making it into the journal if they've been screened before. And that's how we run our peer review process.
Yeah, I would probably back up. We don't have a two-track per se sort of approach as Christoph just outlined, but maybe it's better if I back up and talk about the types of outputs we have overall, because that informs as well the peer review process. So clearly our bread and butter and the number one is full research articles, whether they're single authored or co-authored. That fit the aims and scope and all the criteria that we've already mentioned. Those two go to double-blind peer review. As always, we ask authors to be patient because it is becoming increasingly difficult sometimes to find and getting peer reviewers to agree. One might return it within, we give them a month, we suggest a month, but we are also aware that they're doing this, out of the kindness of their heart. So we have leeway there. So some come back pretty quick, others take much longer and need nudging, and there's a whole story around that. But that is the typical process. It usually gets some kind of obviously returned with some kind of additional work to be done, whether that's moderate to a sort of reject and resubmit, I, as an editor, try my best to, if there's merit in the article, to at least get them a second chance, give them a good review, and then hopefully see it again. It's very often that I give a reject after a series of peer reviews. That usually comes as a desk reject up front. I say the other types of, and you can see these obviously on the website. If you peruse it, we have special issues, obviously, that are sometimes I put out a call every year for them, but I have a backlog of 2 or 3 years, so I'm not doing that at the moment because I have enough in. But that isn't to discourage people from putting in proposals on them, and we like them to be pretty rigorous. They don't have to be 20 pages, and but a good outline of what's coming, a good rationale and everything for it, a timeline of where they are. Is it the beginning of the process? Do they have these papers ready to go? And those kind of things. Special issues still go to double-blind peer review. Because those are essentially a collection of full research articles, right? So they go through the same scrutiny as you would expect of those articles, which sometimes comes to a surprise of some authors. Especially, it depends on the tradition of where they come from. They think if they've signed on to a special issue, means this is a easy publication, and we need to keep those rigorous. Then there is special sections we have. Now, these are still rigorous, but they're not as rigorous as full research articles. They tend to be more topical, policy based, or looking at events that happen. If you look on the website, we have one recently on NATO at 75. And so you have scholars of NATO who have all contributed to that across. But those go to what I would call peer review light. And a lot of that is done rigorously by the editors of the special section, and then once again I'll get a collection of them to go through that. But it's clear that it's not sort of at the same level. Then we've also done things like interventions, where someone wants to write a sort of a intervention piece on a specific topic. Again, we still goes through some peer review, but again, with the peer reviewers understanding what the idea behind this is. And then, of course, we have book reviews, and basically that's just reviewed by me, edited and things by me. So I think that's how I would tie those two together. I think it's also good for your maybe potential contributors or people looking to submit to think about, does it fit the aims and scope, right? So if an article is submitted, if it's desk rejected, it's probably either because it's a great article, it's just not what defense studies does. So maybe it's more pure IR or something more political or historical, although we still look at that. Or they've just not understood what a research article is. And it comes more looking like a report, or it's a practitioner, very practitioner only based, or something that's even very technical. So I'll get articles that are comparing tanks, but not in a conceptual or how we use on the battle space, but size, meter, specs, and all those kind of things, which is has an added value, but it's not what we do. So those tend to get desk rejected, or obviously they're just not or even anywhere near publishable quality, but I'm sure your listeners are not in that category.
I'll just add something in terms of special issues, special collections. At SJMS, we do special collections with guest editors, which we open calls for occasionally, but we've got two lined up now, very good ones. I'm looking forward to them. But those calls will be published, and as Simon just said, they all go through the same peer review process, which means that you're not guaranteed a publication because you sign up to a guest editor's promise of being included, because we as editorial teams still run the same peer review process through also for the introduction of the special collection. So we try to keep those standards at the very same level as the normal standard single contributions.
That's a good point. And we in defense studies, if someone is submitting a proposal for a special issue and a special section, but even I guess it applies to that as well. We often ask them to send in a list of potential reviewers that will look at the piece as a whole, right? So it's quite common with special issues. Someone gets an article and says, I don't understand how this fits in. It seems to be part of something else, you know. And so obviously that's part of the editor-in-chief to make sure they're aware that it's part of a special issue and not just a standalone article. But if they can think about reviewers who might look at half of it or as a whole, that also helps for for the collection to have coherence in the end.
Speaking of which, what I'd like to add here too is that we also offer authors the opportunity to suggest reviewers they consider suitable, but also suggest people who they do not want to review particular pieces. So for people who've done more publishing or have a longer career in academia, they might be aware that some people in the field might be particularly hostile to their sort of argument. So there's an opportunity here. That said, if people suggest potential reviewers, we also do check whether those people might have conflicts of interest and want to make sure that they do not suggest people who might provide them with a safe passage to the article. So that's something for us as editorial team to just navigate. But as Simon also said, it's getting increasingly hard to find suitable reviewers. Both Simon and me receive plenty of review requests ourselves, and being sympathetic to those as I am, or Simon surely is as well. We are aware that people are kind of overloaded with review requests, which is also a reason why we try to screen them kind of perhaps harshly at the first stage, to make sure that people who get review requests by us can be sure that the editors have read it and the editor sees some potential in publishing it. And I think that's what Simon also said for the defense studies. It's just a good practice to save reviewers' time and all our time, also authors, to just perhaps be a bit more strict in the desk review stage than overloading the process later on.
Sorry, I was just going to put one last thing in. One of the things that has changed is quite often in the past, I don't know if this is the same for you, Christoph, but there was a house rules of citations and references and everything. That has changed now. So basically that can be done after, because a lot of times people write it in one way and they get discouraged to submit because they have to redo the whole, they'll have to do it eventually, but at least at this point it's done after acceptance and not before. So if authors are worried about that, they can relax on that one a bit. It's a bit of a time saver for them.
Perhaps following up on that and advice to potential authors, for folks who may be thinking of sending their first article to your journal, would there be any recent articles that could serve as a good example of work published in your journal, or would you have any other advice about how to frame the contribution? It's not measuring tire sizes as much for defense studies.
Well, if Christoph and I are doing our job well, all of them should be good examples of how to do that, right? But what I would say is, instead of trying to point out one article in particular and favoritism of recent publications and receiving emails back for doing that, what I would say is, go on the latest, the latest publications that are online, find some that are listed under the open access, clearly, if that is an issue, and read them, not just for the subject matter, but delivery, right? And see how it's been delivered, what the format is to them. Are they ticking all those boxes, right? And because quite often most desk rejects, well, not most, but a lot of desk rejects come because they've just failed to do the simple things. If it's something like they forgot to put in an abstract, okay, I can email back and say, can you resubmit this with an abstract, or take your name off this because it's supposed to be anonymous. Those kind of things are, okay, we all forget those. But, read clearly what needs to be done before it's submitted, so you're not losing at the first stage. So yeah, I would encourage to go and read maybe one from each of those, right? Look at the kind of pure research articles, look at some of the articles out of the special issues and the special sections to kind of compare those. Because sometimes I have had articles that I've maybe desk rejected and they say, well, how dare you reject this? It's, I've read articles on your website that are this short or da da, but it's probably because they've read something that was under a different category. And to be fair, that's not always easy to do if you're looking at it online. It might seem to be a pure research article or not until it drops as a full issue. But know those different types of things so they know their expectations beforehand. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, and I'd follow Simon's lead in not picking single articles, but letting authors know that they can actually browse the website and look for the contribution they want to make. So the articles on our website are clearly marked as research article, practice-based article. Pick some of these, perhaps in an area where you want to contribute yourself. And also what Simon mentioned is make sure that delivery follows what we want to see. So for us, as I mentioned, we want to know what is the contribution and what follows from your contribution in the research track. So the so what question should always be borne in mind. And authors should also be clear what they're actually contributing themselves. So desk rejects in our case often, as Simon mentioned, often don't follow like the basic standards of what we want to do, but also do not make clear from the get-go where they want to be seen and where they situate themselves in the field. That's a skill, but particularly with authors who are new to the field, they can rely on us if there's potential with the rest of the article that we hint them towards making those changes in the desk review phase. What I'd also encourage authors is to look at, we have a editor's note from the previous editors team. Søren Sjögren, who co-authored that, is still on board, but there's an editor's note from 2024, which pretty clearly states our scopes and aims and what we as an editorial team look at when we scan articles for potential publication. And I think for prospective authors, that's a pretty good hand to grab when you want to guide your article towards publication with us.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing as well? I think, we could easily talk about a list of topics, and we might get onto that are interesting. But another good exercise to go and read the journal, because any potential contributor or author is going to be working in an area and they're within a literature. So have a read of them to find ones that you think you're building on, that a framework builds on that, or is their framework is applicable to some different case studies, or indeed something you're a bit more critical of. And so I think what's good for any journal is when you have authors re-engaging with debates in that journal, instead of, just disparate articles that kind of talk to themselves. So it's always nice to have something that is picking up on previous publications and engaging with those arguments as well.
My final question for both of you today actually follows on that note of debates or topics of interest, and I was wondering if there are any particular areas that your journal is particularly interested in receiving submissions about in the next little while.
Yeah, so for SJMS, what I can say is, again, I can repeat that we are a very broad outlet, but we're obviously very concerned or interested in things that affect the situation of the Baltic states and the Nordic states in the changing security environment. So that could be matters concerned for small states in particular, or small states in NATO, threats posed by Russia, and changes in the military organization. Issues of recruitment and retention are pretty pressing in Europe at the moment. So we're very much interested in that. Practical issues such as technological development and their consequences for the military organization, Arctic security, for instance, civil military relations. So we're very broad. We're also a very young journal, so we've only been founded in 2018. So we don't have a large history of browsing where authors can look into old articles, but there are some nascent debates within our journal which we would like to see extended. For instance, the question of how NATO deals with human security. We've got some upcoming debates in there too, but we're generally interested in broader issues, but obviously, particularly if they're relevant for Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, I think at defense studies we're, obviously similar. I don't want to pinpoint it to one sort of debate that we're only interested in. Obviously, what we're really interested in is state of the art in any debate, right? And where someone's trying to advance either the conceptual theoretical understanding of that or the case studies and building upon that. But like Christoph said, we're interested in a broad range of things. How do they affect military as organizations, right? So obviously anything around the latest operational concepts, things that are interesting. NATO without the US, or in an operational type of environment, theories of war, theories of domains of power in domains, and any of these things I think are interesting. And so then it's up to the authors are they trying to pull this together as a team with other guest editors to have a real debate amongst themselves within that sort of special issue or section versus a real deep dive in a single piece that connects to these. Defense studies obviously has been around a lot longer, not a lot longer, but a bit longer. And so there are some of those previous articles to engage with. But again, some of the journey, I know my former colleague, David Galbraith at the University of Bath, who was the editor before me, I took over in 2016. It was this, as I said earlier, trying to move the journal away from more practitioner-based to being a much more academic journal that's cited by academics and things. So, those are the kind of things we're interested in keeping that going.
Well, I want to thank both of you for sharing some of your time today to provide our listeners with a window into defense studies and the Scandinavian Journal of Military Studies. I really appreciated the insights you were able to offer into the editorial processes and openness of both of your journals. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.